impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Paul Denning, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from current issues of the Niagara Gazette on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. This is from January 3rd and 4th. A piece of Bills history. Falls caretaker of infamous Bills goal post reflects on final regular season game at Highmark Stadium. It's written by Mark Scheer. Sunday's final regular season game at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park has many Buffalo Bills fans reminiscing about the best of times and occasionally the worst of times they've experienced while visiting the team's home stadium over the past 52 years. One of the most memorable games for fans old enough to remember what happened on September 7, 1980, when the Bills, after years of trying, finally took down the rival Miami Dolphins at what was then known as Rich Stadium. The game lives on in Bills lore, in part because of what it meant for the franchise. The Bills emerged from the decade of the 1970s and finally beat the Dolphins 17-7, snapping a decade-long 20-game losing streak against the Finns. After the game, jubilant Bills fans stormed the field. Some of those fans, including a contingent from Niagara Falls, walked out of the stadium that day with a unique piece of history. Pieces of the goalposts that were torn down in celebration, not of a division or conference title, or even a Super Bowl, but rather a 1-0 start to the season. After the game, the Bills' overjoyed owner, Ralph Wilson, was so happy about the outcome that he agreed to pick up the tab for the fans who forcibly removed the key pieces of stadium equipment. "It's the biggest win the club's ever had," Wilson said. "Bigger than the AFL championships. I'll be happy to buy new goalposts." So where did those goalposts end up? One piece remains in good hands thanks to a group of diehard fans from the Falls. City Police Officer Paul Codila has a section, roughly 15 feet long, of one of the goalposts in a safe storage space in the city. With Sunday's game against the New York Jets, the final home Bills game at Highmark before the team moves across the street to its new stadium next year, Codila has done a lot of thinking about his family's love of all things Buffalo football and the special goalpost piece they've now had in their possession for 45 years. He described the team's pending departure from Highmark Stadium as bittersweet. "I know they need the new stadium, but that old stadium has a lot of good memories," Codila said. I'm looking for the rest of the article. Here we are. Codila's late father, Rich, and his late uncle, Chris, who were both Niagara Falls firefighters, were sitting with a group of friends in the upper section of Rich Stadium in September 1980, when the Bills finally beat Miami to end their 10-year Dolphins losing streak. Former Falls resident and a close friend of the Codilas, Frank Imordino, has fond memories of the aftermath of that game. He was part of a contingent of about 20 fans, including Rich and Chris Codila, who were part of a larger group collectively known as the Worldwide Bills Backers and Social Club. Imordino and company watched from above as the goalpost came down. For whatever reason, when the game was over, fans on the field passed one long piece over the stadium wall, prompting fans in the lower bowl to keep passing it up from one row to the next. Eventually, the section found its way to the upper deck and into the hands of Immordino and his crew of fans from the Falls. When the Bills finally won, the goalpost came down and somehow it came to the upper level where we were, he recalled. Somehow we got it and we hung on to it. It just came up to us, he added. I can't believe it came up to the second level. It was coming right towards us, and everyone said, grab on. So we grabbed on and just walked it out of the stadium. I'm surprised we got it. In September 2011, after the Bills ended a similar misery-inducing 15-game losing streak to the New England Patriots, Chris Cudilla did an interview with the newspaper where he recalled the day fans got swept up in the mayhem of the 1980 game against Miami. Chris, who passed away in 2014, also remembered, as Immordino did, how later that night they paraded around the Falls, bar hopping while celebrating the Bills' victory with their piece of the goalpost in tow. The night we brought it back, we took it to every bar on Niagara Street, Chris Cudilla recalled. Every bar we hit, we'd march in with this goalpost, and the place would go crazy. Needless to say, we had a long night. For several years, the goalpost was a fixture inside the old dugout bar on Niagara Street. It was removed after the bar closed and was later split into two sections, with the bar's owner taking one piece and Cudilla's bunch keeping the other. The half currently in the Cudilla family's possession is signed by many of the fans who had a hand in acquiring it. It's just become our symbol, Chris Cudilla said in his 2011 interview. It's become our group symbol now. The section of upright has made many public appearances, often at local bars or during pregame outings at the stadium over the years. The unique piece was driven to the stadium strapped to the ladder rack on top of the truck Paul Cudilla's dad drove as part of his garage door installation business. Paul Cudilla said many more names have been added to the signatures over the years, mostly from fans who were able to sign it while getting an up-close look when the unique piece was brought out of storage for pre-game appearances. It is really cool that it has all of the autographs on it for all the people who have attended the games over the years, Paul said. Paul Cudilla admits the goalpost is not as active as it was in earlier years, a situation he said he has had to do with some members of the original Bills backers group, including his father and his uncle, passing away. Others, he noted, have moved away, making it more difficult and costly for them to attend games in person. Immordino and fellow members of the Worldwide Bills Backers and Social Club have seen a lot of games in Orchard Park over the decades and have attended some big postseason games, including Super Bowl losses at Tampa Stadium in Tampa Bay and at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. At one time, he said, the Backers Bunch, thanks to arrangements made by Falls native Roy LaGreca Jr., had more than 75 members who were season ticket holders. Immordino said many of the original Bills backers are now like him, in their 70s and living outside New York State. Excuse me. Now a Florida resident, he noted that many of the original club members still travel from Michigan, California, and other parts of the country to make sure they see at least one game at the stadium in Orchard Park each year. They hold out hope, as do all Bills fans, that this year could finally be the year the Bills win it all. Our numbers are thinning, but the core people are still with us, he said. Neither the Cordelas nor any of the Bills backers club members have ever been formally contacted by the Bills organization about the possibility of putting the piece on display at the new stadium or another location with ties to the team. While he's not looking to part with it, Paul said he would be open to the idea, provided an arrangement could be made that he thought his father, his uncle, and their fellow Bills backers could accept. Immordino agreed. In a perfect world, to me, all of the guys in that original crew would get a piece of that original goalpost, Paul said. For Paul, the piece will always be a reminder of all the good times his dad, his uncle, members of their family, and their friends have had while following the Buffalo Bills through a lot of ups and downs for what's been decades now. Pretty much every Bills game I think about my dad, Paul said. I'd love to see my dad's reaction to Josh Allen and his success. My dad lived through Jim Kelly and the 4 Super Bowls. I'd love to see his reaction to this current Bills team and what he would think about them. There's another Cudilla already on the road to joining Bills Mafia and maybe someday inheriting the job of caretaker of one of the most memorable pieces of Buffalo football memorabilia of all time. Paul's 8-year-old son Ryan and a group of his friends attended their first in-person Bills game at Highmark Stadium earlier this season. Paul said he made sure he did what his dad did when he attended his first game by finding the rowdiest group of professional Bills game tailgaters he could, so his son and his friends could get their first real taste of true Buffalo football experience. He said the best part for him was watching his son engage in a time-honored Bills game tradition, a game of catch in the stadium parking lot. We'd find older guys and they'd toss us the football when we would go to games, and now my son was there with his buddies, and these college kids were passing the ball to them, and it was great. Bills football is just like genetic around here. It brought back great memories, he said. An Associated Press article. Japan says Trump has invited its leader to the U.S. This is through the Associated Press. Washington. President Donald Trump invited Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi during a phone call Friday to visit the United States this year, the Japanese Foreign Ministry said, in what would be the ultra-conservative leader's first trip to the U.S. since taking office in October. The White House is yet to confirm the call and the invitation. It comes as ties between Japan and China have been strained, ramping up tensions in the region. The U.S., a close ally of Japan, is seeking to strengthen its ties with Tokyo, but also stabilize its relationship with Beijing ahead of a likely trip by Trump to China in April. Beijing staged 2-day military exercises in the waters off Taiwan this week. Takaichi, Japan's first female prime minister, infuriated China late last year when she said Chinese military action against Taiwan could be grounds for a Japanese military response, breaking away from former Japanese leaders' strategic ambiguity on the highly sensitive matter. In a statement Friday, the Japanese Foreign Ministry said Takaichi and Trump agreed to coordinate for the visit to happen this spring. Kyodo News, Japan's news agency, suggested that Takaichi's trip could coincide with the annual Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington. The Foreign Ministry said the two leaders affirmed that they would carve out a new chapter in the history of the Japanese-U.S. alliance in a year when the U.S. celebrates the 250th anniversary of its founding, and that they would further deepen the friendly relations between the two nations, including economic and security cooperation. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Gazette on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Another Associated Press article, Zoran Mamdani's first full day as New York City mayor includes subway rides. New York. Less than 24 hours after throngs of ecstatic supporters poured into Manhattan for his history-making inauguration, Zoran Mamdani began his first full day of work with a routine familiar to many New Yorkers, trudging to the subway from a cramped apartment. Bundled against the frigid temperature and seemingly fighting off a cold, he set out Friday morning from the one-bedroom apartment in Queens that he shares with his wife. But unlike most commuters, Mamdani's trip was documented by a photo and video crew and periodically interrupted by neighbors wishing him luck. The 34-year-old Democratic Socialist, whose victory was hailed as a watershed moment for the progressive movement, has now begun the task of running the nation's largest city, signing orders, announcing appointments, facing questions from the press, and answering for some of the actions he took in his first hours. But first, the symbolism-laden day one commute. Flanked by security guards and a small clutch of aides on a Manhattan-bound train, he agreed to several selfies with wide-eyed riders, then moved to a corner seat of the train to review his briefing materials. When a pair of French tourists, confused by the hubbub, approached Mamdani, he introduced himself as the new mayor of New York. They seemed doubtful. He held up the morning copy of the New York Daily News, featuring his smiling face as proof. Mamdani, a Democrat, is hardly alone among city mayors in using the transit system to communicate relatability. His predecessor, Eric Adams, also rode the subway on his first day, and both Bill de Blasio and Michael Bloomberg made a habit out of it, particularly when seeking to make a political point. Next article, Youngstown's Sister and Brother featured in Christmas film. This was written by Robert Creenan from the Niagara Gazette. TV movie premiered on Great American Family Channel on December 21. Youngstown. This past year saw a few made-for-TV Christmas movies filmed in Youngstown. With one Hallmark movie already premiered, another movie on a different channel gave the spotlight to the Niagara County Village. On December 21, on the Great American Family Channel, one of its locally produced Christmas movies called Mario Lopez Presents Chasing Christmas premiered. Those who watched it surely noticed the Sister and Brother Children apparel store among the other Main Street sites in the village. It was almost surreal to see our logo, said co-owner Lisa Leffer on Friday, nearly 2 weeks after the premiere. When main actor Trevor Donovan comes out of the door, that's the door we go through every day to go to work. The story is about Buffalo Morning Show host Michael Martindale, played by Donovan, and artist Mia, played by Jillian Murray, as they travel across Buffalo in search of the season's most sought-after toy, the Golden Gliders, for their children. As they face their challenges along the way, Michael and Mia get drawn closer over the course of the holiday season. Mario Lopez is one of the producers, as the actor and Entertainment Tonight host has appeared in Great American Family movies starting in 2024. His son, Dominic Lopez, also appears in the film as Mia's son, Cruz. In the movie itself, sister and brother is only featured during a montage of Martindale going into different stores trying to find the golden glider while carrying a scraggly-looking Christmas tree to no success. While Lisa and her husband, store co-owner Mark Leffer, were not in the film, Mark noted his head could be seen sitting behind the store counter in one shot. Lisa said some of the production crew came into the store buying clothes for children in the movie, but they liked what they saw inside and said it would be great if they could work this store into it somehow. The filming took place on October 29, so everything inside the store then was Halloween themed. Everything like that had to be taken down and replaced with Christmas items for the day, with a crew of around 10 people on hand. It was a nice experience, Lisa said. A couple of actresses and actors came in and met us, and they're friendly. Sister and Brother had started in 1954 in Lewiston, with the Leffers being the store's third owners. Lisa was a friend of the previous owners, taking over after they retired 5 years ago and moving it to Youngstown, first at 431 Main Street, then to its current 400 Main Street location in November 2022. We try and sell the stuff that you can't get at the typical box stores, Mark said. It's been a very successful location for us. The other prominent made-for-TV movie that filmed in Youngstown, Hallmark's A Newport Christmas, had the village and the stone jug stand in for Newport, Rhode Island, in its time travel plot. This time, with the plot explicitly set in Buffalo, the village could be itself as part of Western New York. Despite prominent Erie County locations like Amherst and Williamsville being named during the movie, Youngstown itself was never mentioned. Other village locations on Main Street were filmed for exterior shots, but not only was Sister and Brother the only place where they filmed inside, but it was the only one that had its name and logo prominently featured. We couldn't have been happier, Mark said. We were very pleasantly surprised when we saw how much visibility we got in the actual movie. The Monday after the movie premiered, Mark posted about the prominent feature of the store in the movie on their social media pages, which he said got the most interactions of any of their posts. I got so many people call me up and say, "We saw your store on TV," Mark said. Maybe we're naive, but we're not exactly Hollywood out here. To see our store on my TV on a streaming channel, it's a big deal. Great American Family is owned by the Arlington, Texas-based Great American Media, whose president and CEO, Bill Abbott, held those same titles with Hallmark Media. The company, which includes the Christian film company PureFlix, has programming with more faith-based theming. Buffalo Business First reported in November that this film is one of 15 movies Great American Family has made in the Buffalo area over the past year. The next article is done by Mark Scheer for the Gazette. A plan to address city issues. Mayor Robert Racino said this week that his administration is working on a plan aimed at making sure department heads and employees work more closely together to identify and address issues they come across in the course of their duties citywide. During his weekly address from the mayor's office on Friday, Racino said members of his administration are now working on what he described as the development of a safe neighborhood initiative, part of which would involve representatives from the police, fire, and public works departments making sure they document concerns as they come across them so they can be taken care of as quickly as possible by the appropriate branch of city government. They are all out in different areas of the city and they see different things, and we are asking them to just make note of it and submit it so it can be targeted to the right department and be addressed, Rustino said. We're looking to really lean into that in the coming year. In his weekly message, which is posted to the mayor's office YouTube channel, Rustino said he's looking forward to a productive and, from a city hall standpoint, cooperative 2026. He pointed to several initiatives that started this past year that he believes show real progress is starting to be made in the city, referencing work on an ongoing plan to redevelop the city market and the recent start of renovation work at the Hotel Niagara downtown as two prime examples. These things really, I think, can show in a concrete way that we are starting to turn a corner, Rustino said. The mayor also welcomed returning and new members of the Falls City Council, and what he hopes will be the start of a spirit of cooperation moving forward. City lawmakers, new and old, including incumbents Jim Perry, Brian Archie, and David Zajac, and newcomers Bridget Miles and Vincent Cawley, were sworn in on Thursday during a ceremony at City Hall. The next article is also written by Robert Creenan. Cambria Fire Company receiving $20,000 in state funds, part of more than $500,000 given to boost volunteer fire company ranks. The Cambria Volunteer Fire Company was named one of 31 state fire units receiving state funding for new equipment and to boost recruitment. The company received $20,280 from the State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services last week, which awarded $576,401 to companies, departments, municipalities, supporting nonprofits, and EMS organizations made up mostly of volunteers. Allowed uses for this funding include leadership training and development courses, public outreach and special events, career-based educational programs, marketing and advertising, health and wellness initiatives, and personal protective equipment. The greatest resource of any volunteer fire or EMS agency is its members, said State Fire Administrator James Cable. The projects funded by this grant program will support the retention of trained and experienced personnel while promoting recruitment efforts for new members to allow these organizations to continue to protect the communities they serve as effectively and as safely as possible. Approximately 94% of the state's 1,648 registered fire departments are made up mostly of volunteers, according to the U.S. Fire Administration. Those volunteers have declined by 32% over the past 30 years. Governor Kathy Hochul also announced last week that $25 million in capital grants to volunteer fire departments is available for upgrading facilities and equipment. Municipalities across Niagara County have worked to bring in new volunteer recruits over the past year, whether it's their respective municipality increasing the incentives firefighters receive, or the state organization FASNY reimbursing college tuition for volunteers. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Gazette on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Next article is a staff report. Republicans call for audit of state program spending. Urge governor to hire private firm to conduct audit of programs. Albany. Following reports of widespread fraud involving taxpayer dollars in Minnesota, members of the Senate Republican Conference have penned a letter to Governor Kathy Hochul's office urging her to immediately hire a private professional services firm to conduct an independent audit of programs administered by state agencies to ensure that public funds are only being distributed to authorized organizations and individuals and utilized for authorized activities. Senate Republican leader Robert Ort will be introducing a bill to require an independent audit of New York State government programs by a professional third party and to mandate that all findings of fraud or abuse will be promptly referred to appropriate law enforcement authorities. Quotes, New York State taxpayers deserve to know, without a shred of doubt, that taxpayer dollars in this state are being allocated, distributed, and spent in the most responsible, effective, legal, and accountable ways. State Senator Tom O'Mara, a ranking member of Senate Investigations and Government Operations, said in a press release. That's especially true for New York's Medicaid program, which has been plagued for far too long by abuse, fraud, and waste. It can't be tolerated anymore. This audit should be one of Governor Hochul's top priorities in the new year, and it should be done without delay, stated Senator Tom O'Mara, ranking member of Senate Investigations and Government Operations. These actions follow recent revelations of rampant fraud and abuse of taxpayer dollars uncovered by investigative reporting in Minnesota, including schemes that reportedly involved sham daycare centers. An independent audit is necessary to root out all similar schemes excuse me, currently underway here in New York, according to a press release. For example, $68 million in Medicaid fraud committed by a Brooklyn adult daycare operator uncovered by the Department of Justice in August. The state improperly paid over $2.6 billion in Medicaid premiums for people who do not live in New York. $13 million in Medicaid fraud for transporting patients to medical appointments. $7 million in Medicaid fraud for fraudulent billing. Quotes, if Governor Hochul isn't alarmed by what's happening in Minnesota, New Yorkers will lose even more trust in how their hard-earned tax dollars are being spent, Ott said in a letter. The governor must do her job and guarantee this isn't happening here. If nothing is amiss, there's no excuse for refusing a comprehensive independent audit. Failing to act would be an extreme disservice to taxpayers. Given that New York administers comparable programs involving billions of taxpayer dollars, it is imperative that proactive measures be taken to ensure similar abuses are not occurring here. Next article was from the Syracuse.com, Mark Weiner. Hochul delays acting on bill to establish new court districts. Lack of action is impacting 3 local counties. Governor Kathy Hochul is taking some extra time to decide on the final bill to reach your desk at the end of the year. A controversial bill that would create new judicial districts in Onondaga, Monroe, and Erie counties was delivered to Hochul's desk on New Year's Eve. Rather than sign or veto the bill, Hochul is using a procedure allowed by the state constitution to buy herself an extra month to consider the legislation. The governor can delay acting on any bill delivered on the last day of the year. Hochul will have an additional 30 days from the first day of the legislative year until February 6 to act on the legislation. Democrats who control the state assembly and Senate passed the judicial redistricting bill on the last day of their legislative session in June. In upstate New York, judicial districts span multiple counties, mixing Democratic-dominant cities with many Republican-heavy suburban and rural counties. The proposed change would make Onondaga, Monroe, and Erie counties each a separate district that would include Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo, cities with lopsided Democratic voter enrollment advantages. The bill's Democratic supporters said the bill will help increase racial diversity in the judiciary and allow urban areas to have judges who better reflect the demographics of their communities. Republicans said the bill amounts to political gerrymandering aimed at swinging judicial districts in favor of Democrats. Next article is an Associated Press article. Fans mourn closure of vending machine company Sprinkles Cupcakes. New York. Sprinkles Cupcakes, a company famous for selling sweet treats in vending machines known as cupcake ATMs, has shut down after 20 years of operation around the United States, according to its former owner. Even though I sold the company over a decade ago, I still have such a personal connection to it, and this isn't how I thought the story would go, said Candace Nelson, who started the company after she lost her job in 2005. The closure was announced December 30. Nelson started Sprinkles Cupcakes in her own kitchen, and the first location was in a small Beverly Hills storefront that had previously been a sandwich shop. The brand would go on to ascend to national fame, and fans took to social media following the company's announcement to lament the closure. The company's cupcake dispensing machines in malls and airports briefly went viral on TikTok for the not-so-subtle I Love Sprinkles jingle that played repeatedly while a mechanical arm delivered the dessert. The company no longer has any products for sale on its website, which also has removed all operational locations across the country. Nelson sold her business to private equity firm Carp Riley, LLC, in 2012, after the company had expanded to 10 locations across the country. The firm owns dozens of other companies for products including a health food home delivery service, kombucha, and protein wellness shakes. Carp Riley did not respond to an emailed request for comment Friday evening. Neither the firm nor Nelson provided a reason for the cupcake company's closure. Private equity has dramatically expanded its influence in restaurants over the last decade, investing $94.5 billion between 2014 and 2024, according to data from capital market company PitchBook. Some outraged Sprinkles Cupcake fans said on social media that the closures were part of a larger trend where private equity firms purchase restaurants and retail brands like Red Lobster or TGI Fridays that later file for bankruptcy or close altogether. Here's an article written by Jim Bowles. Early Alternative Medicine in Niagara County, Wheatlet and Triscuits. Editor's note. This is the third installment in an occasional series by Jim Bowles exploring alternative medicine in Niagara County between 1830 and 1930. Into the 20th century in the Niagara region, because traditional medical care was not seen as reliable or effective, people often turned to heavily marketed, quotes, healthy foods to cure their ills. Two giants of wheat-based food production had a foothold in Niagara County, one in Lockport and the other in Niagara Falls. Let's look in on each of them briefly. Franklin Mills Company. In Lockport, the south bank of the Erie Canal beside the locks was home to many factories that utilized the powerful mill races to produce their products. With a large painted Wheatlet sign on the side of its building, the Franklin Mills Company stood out to those traveling on the canal. The sign was also visible on the many period postcards of the locks at Lockport. The business address of the company was 731 Spring Street at Garden Street, a significant distance from the canal and the mill race that was on the south bank. So how did Franklin Mills receive water power? I reached out to a local expert on canal mill races, Dr. Scott Guys. His records show that the Franklin Mills factory received power from both the South Mill Race on the canal and 18 Mile Creek. At the time Franklin Mills was operated, the mill race left the canal bank and ran southeast, crossing under Market Street and continuing to Garden Street. Research indicates the remains of the Franklin Mills plant, originally raised in 1833, can now be found at 31 Exchange Street. Franklin Mills Company's main products, Wheatlet, a breakfast food, and Franklin Mills flour, were credited with numerous health benefits. From the American Medico-Surgical Bulletin, 1897, the Franklin Mills Company, containing as it does all the phosphates, mineral salts, and gluten of the entire wheat, is recommended by many physicians for use in the preparation of food for those suffering from weak stomach, because it is easily digestible. Nourishing as it does every part of the body, it is held to be especially valuable in the diet of children. Wheatlet was described as an unrefined, unbleached natural food that could offer relief of nervousness, indigestion, irritability, and a morose disposition, which meant depression, and help with clever work such as writing. Franklin Mills flour was proclaimed to be the fine flour of the entire wheat and a brain food. It would help every nerve tissue, feed the nerves, and the nervous and debilitated would be assisted. Franklin Mills Company occupied the 6-story building at 731 Spring Street from 1877 until 1907, when fire destroyed the production plant. After the fire, the company reorganized and consolidated its operations at Batavia. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Gazette on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Shredded Wheat Company. In 1901, because of inexpensive electric power and the powerful image of Niagara Falls as a force of nature, the Natural Food Conservatory moved its operations to the city of Niagara Falls. Its factory, built to overlook the rapids of the Niagara River, was known as the Palace of Light, appointed with white tile, bright lights, and many amenities for workers, including a free hot lunch, rest breaks, air conditioners, showers, and a health and welfare fund that covered sickness, injury, and burial expenses. The name was changed to Shredded Wheat Company in 1908. Although the company had many factories, its Niagara Falls site was very well known because of its promotion as a tourist attraction, drawing thousands of visitors per year. The early history of the company goes back to 1895 in Worcester, Massachusetts. Known as the Cereal Machine Company, its products were granulated wheat shred drink, shredded cereal coffee, wheat shred baby food, and shredding machines. In Niagara Falls, the Shredded Wheat Company's main products were shredded whole wheat biscuit and Triscuit. The touted health benefits of either product were: promotes an active brain, can be used as a spring tonic, builds muscles and bone, builds strength and an entirely healthy body. Local production of shredded wheat and Triscuits at the Palace of Light ceased in 1954 when Nabisco, which had bought out Shredded Wheat Company in 1928, shifted operation to its warehouse at what is now Rainbow Boulevard at 10th Street. Parts of the Palace of Light on Buffalo Avenue were demolished in 1963. For a time, the remaining office building was used by Niagara County Community College as a college office and classrooms. That building, sometimes referenced as Nabisco U or Shredded U, was demolished in 1976. Thanks to the Niagara County Historical Society, the Niagara County Historical Office, Lockport Public Library, Dr. Scott Guys, Kyle Condren from Elegant Surfaces, and Lockport Realtor Maureen Walk for information shared about the Franklin Mills Company. The next article is from an article feature called America 250, of course, referring to our 250th anniversary. Common sense plants seed that sprouts into the United States. Common Sense was published on January 10, 1776 in Philadelphia, and circulated in the American colonies at a time when reconciliation between the colonists and Britain seemed unlikely, according to the National Constitution Center. The message in the 47-page pamphlet was presented in plain, unadorned writing, according to the center, appealing to common capacities of all people. Common Sense questioned traditional hierarchies, condemning monarchy as an affront to God. Quotes, "But there is another and greater distinction for which no truly natural or religious reason can be assigned, and that is the distinction of men into kings and subjects," Paine wrote. "Male and female are the distinctions of nature, good and bad the distinctions of heaven. But how a race of men came into the world so exalted above the rest, and distinguished like some new species, is worth inquiring into, and whether they are the means of happiness or of misery to mankind. It is unknown how many copies were printed, but it was read by thousands and read aloud in taverns and meeting places, pushing colonists literate and illiterate toward the coming fight for America's independence." Did you know? American actors Betty White and James Earl Jones share their January 17 birthdays with athletes Muhammad Ali and Dwayne Wade, artists Kid Rock and Lil Jon, founding father Benjamin Franklin, and Department of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Emancipation. President Abraham Lincoln, on January 1, 1863, in the third year of the bloody American Civil War, made the Emancipation Proclamation in order of freeing slaves in the Confederate States. Although the proclamation did not end slavery in the nation, it captured the hearts and imagination of millions of Americans and fundamentally transformed the charter of the war. After January 1, 1863, every advance of federal troops expanded the domain of freedom, according to the National Archives. By the numbers. Operation Desert Shield became Desert Storm on January 16, 1991. The war in Iraq also became the largest airborne campaign since the Vietnam War. Over 6 weeks, the U.S. and 40 allied nations combined for 18,000 air missions, 85.5 thousand tons of bombs, and 116,000 combat air sorties. Ground forces liberated Kuwait in 100 hours following the air campaign. The source of information is from the Department of Defense. Historic site, the Battle of Princeton. The Battle of Princeton on January 3, 1777, was General George Washington's first victory against British forces. It followed a victory in Trenton against Hessian forces. The win electrified the young nation, according to MountVernon.org, a nonprofit charged with preserving, restoring, and managing the estate of George Washington. The general's use of guerrilla warfare and his effective leadership delivered confidence to Continental Army soldiers that they could beat the best British soldiers and discourage loyalists in the opposing forces. The final action of the battle took place at the center of what is now Princeton University at Nassau Hall, which still bears damage from the attack. More quotations on this general subject. This column is called "They Said It." The crew of the spaceship Challenger honored us by the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning. Spoken by President Ronald Reagan, January 28, 1986. Quotes, "We have learned that we cannot live alone at peace, that our own well-being is dependent on the well-being of other nations far away. We have learned that we must live as men, not as ostriches, not as dogs in the manger." That was stated by Franklin D. Roosevelt, January 20th, 1945, during his fourth inaugural address. Other Americans born this month: Paul Revere, January 1st, 1735. Thomas Paine, January 29, 1737. Benedict Arnold, January 14, 1741. Alexander Hamilton, January 11, 1755. Edgar Allan Poe, January 19, 1809. Douglas MacArthur, January 26, 1880. Franklin D. Roosevelt, January 30, 1882. J.D. Salinger, January 1, 1919. Jackie Robinson, January 31, 1919. Gene Hackman, January 30, 1930. Elvis Presley, January 8, 1935. Dolly Parton, January 19, 1946. Oprah Winfrey, January 29, 1954. Kevin Costner, January 18, 1955. Jeff Bezos, January 12, 1964. Bradley Cooper, January 5, 1975. Zooey Deschanel, January 17, 1980. Alicia Keys, January 25, 1981. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from current issues of the Niagara Gazette. We read from the Niagara Gazette every Saturday at 11 a.m. Your reader has been Paul Denning. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the Dunkirk Observer. Following that at 1 o'clock, we have a reading of some of our Northtown Bee papers, including Amherst, Clarence, Cheektowaga, Lancaster, and Depew. And then at 2 o'clock, we have the Southtown Bees, which includes Orchard Park, the Hamburg Sun, the East Aurora, and West Seneca papers. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Radio Reading broadcasts daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to people who are blind or have a print disability and are provided reading radios. Radio Reading's broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. From broadcast studios at 1199 Harlem Road, Radio Reading continues our almost 40-year tradition of award-winning service. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,